of the elevator, right?
Yeah.
And we didn't have footage at that time of what actually happened.
Right.
So you have to kind of make up in your mind your version of what actually happened in there. And recently, just within the last couple days, TMZ, I guess, apparently showed the videotape. They got their hands on the videotape, and
Right.
you're able to see what happened. And they're now playing that video over and over and over again. And I think it's fair to say that it's pretty disturbing for most people, right?
Yeah, and I can't imagine how disturbing it is for his wife also, because she gets re-victimized every time that she sees it. So that's really a sad part about it too. People don't understand that, and so they're making. I mean, as much as what the NFL did, it was there's a great group called Futures Without Violence, and they were brought in when the March incident happened. Actually, they were brought in before to the NFL when, was it Lewis who killed his wife and himself? And to help them set up actually a program or a policy for what the NFL would do when domestic violence happens. The problem is that this is like step one, because the other piece of step two would be educating before an event happened.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
Right.
that's the piece, whereas there is a curriculum for coaches of high school kids called Boys to Men that is actually about teaching them about violence, because the game is so violent.
Yeah.
There's so many head injuries that these guys get, right? So there's a lot of violence that takes place in this, and there needs to be education. So that's the take that we know about as a domestic
When you
violence
say you're talking about
agency.
violence in the game of football,
Violence in the game of football.
I don't know if you can. I mean, it's all perspective about whether it's violence or if it's part of the game. For me, violence, defining violence is more of your come from. If you're coming from an angry place with the intent to hurt somebody or cause physical injury, rather than going to being in a sport that's structured and you're going to tackle somebody to bring them down to get the ball. So, and I get what you're saying.
I think it is inherently a violent game.
I think it is too.
I think and I think people agree with that it is
It is. There's a lot of talk out there right now about the fact that it is.
So is boxing violent?
Yes.
Oh God, yeah.
Oh, innate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah.
Your nature is to fight.
I mean, does it mean that somebody's going to go out then and abuse their wife after they do a game? No. I mean, like, all abusers have been abused. I mean, so if you've got somebody who's angry or has had something happen to them in their youth, and then that's kind of like the sport that they play.
Because I played football, and I don't believe I'm a violent person. When I got on the football field, I was clear about the rules, and the rules was if you were running with the ball, I was going to tackle you at all costs within the rules. Now, if they said you can punch and you can poke eyes and do that kind of stuff, then I can say, okay, now there's no rules, so that would be violent.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
But yeah, so sorry.
I think, but let's. Okay, I don't want to argue if it's violent.
No, I'm not here to argue either.
Yeah,
I just wanted to share a
Yeah,
different
that's not what it's like.
perspective.
All I know is that I read some articles in preparation for this today.
Yeah.
And Futures Without Violence, that agency, who is a very respected agency within like the nation around violence and what they do to really help prevent it, was brought in by the NFL. That's just what I'm saying. And one of the things that they had said was the fact, it's like, when you've got somebody who goes to combat, their DV is very different, and we know that from what we've seen, is that their DV is very different because they've been if their boots were on the ground, then they're coming with a different, they're coming to that point very differently, and they're going to be triggered by different things. So they were saying that along with that, being in a game where it can be a very rugged physical game, where you are blocking people, where you are using your body, where sometimes there is talk about the fact that there's a lot of head injuries that happen to these players, that can actually accentuate what happens around domestic violence when they go back into the home.
Yeah, I'm open to that.
Yeah, that's really what I'm getting at.
And that's what I wanted to get the point of, not to, that it's carried away. It's tough for people to turn that switch off.
Sometimes it can be, and also you've got to realize that the statistics show that anyone who has been a batterer can be a batter. It doesn't mean that they all will be, but there has something in both of their lives that created them to meet one another, to kind of accept this behavior for a while, because she married him after that incident.
Yeah.
Well, I believe that there's some kind of psychological dysfunction to some degree on both sides, that they attracted
Right,
each other.
that's exactly, it's a childhood trauma.
Yeah, there's
is
something
basically
going
what
on
they
where
say.
there's a neediness that she's looking to fulfill, and he's looking for somebody to be able to act out whatever's coming up for him, and so somehow they are attracted to each other, and they're now in that relationship.
Right. And love, it's about power and control.
Yes.
So for both of them, and she's coming with a lack of self-esteem at this time, but you know what? They bond over the fact that they're going to take care of each other. They do love each other. They're going to take care of each
When
other.
we come back from the break, I want to talk a little bit more in detail about what are some of the signs that
Okay.
somebody can be in an abusive relationship, because I know it's a big topic on Facebook, and some people they can't wrap their mind around why she's still with him, and why would she not only still be with him, but now get married to him. And
Right.
I think there's some psychological stuff going on that I want to open that up to you, and we'll talk about that more when we come back from the break. Stay tuned for more. You're listening to this special edition on KHTS on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS.
Santa Clarita's hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS, your hometown station. We're also streaming live at hometownstation.com. And we're speaking with Anna, not Anna, because we went over this, but it's Anna and Linda from the Domestic Violence Center of Santa Clarita Valley. And we are talking about the recent stuff. It's obviously, you can't miss it, the stuff with Ray Rice. But we wanted to talk about, you mentioned before the break, signs that there were domestic abuse in the home.
Yeah, I think that, some people can't wrap their mind around why somebody that's abused, why they don't have that switch that just flips and says, wait a minute, and stands up for themselves. And I know, Anna, that you have an incredible story about getting some clarity and taking a stand for yourself and now being a survivor. And we'll get to your story soon. But Linda, I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about what's going on psychologically that a woman or a man would continue to stay in an abusive relationship like that.
Because it's very complicated. I mean, it's very complicated. They come together because it's a love relationship. It usually happens, 90% of all abuse starts when somebody's pregnant. Okay?
Oh.
So, yeah.
I didn't know that.
90% of abuse starts when someone becomes pregnant, because at first, the abuser, because it's a power and control relationship, so they're feeling like they're going to lose her if that happens, all right? Then, what happens after that, you've got this little baby, you're kind of like, now you're with this person, what are you going to do? You're committed, everybody goes into a relationship hoping it's going to work out. You bring kids into the relationship, that just makes it much more complicated.
It changes the game.
Changes the game completely, and then the abuser starts to realize a lot of our clients have, especially the women that we see in the shelter, probably have between 3, 4, 5, and 6 kids. Okay? Because they are now so stuck within that home by having all these children that they're not going to leave him. All right? And there's a lot of infidelity on the part of the male because he knows she's there, that she's not going to leave. When a woman goes to leave an abuser, her income is going to go with like 50% to 100%.
Yeah.
All right? And so where is she going to go? It's not that easy sometimes to get into shelters. It's also, women live in a lot of denial because they know when they go into the relationship that this guy has issues, okay?
I'm glad you brought up denial. I also heard that there's justification going on.
Yeah.
They're trying to justify, well, he'll change.
Oh, he will
or I can
change.
change him.
We will change. A lot of times, our therapist came to me at one point at our program and said, Linda, you got to do something about, everybody thinks God's going to change their man. You got to do something about this religious guy. And we ended up then bringing in, a guy who teaches them meditation, meditation,
Right.
because they have to understand that the only person they can change is themselves.
That's right.
And the other thing is, forgiveness becomes a very hard thing. And we're not saying anybody has a right to hit anybody else, but somehow you have to understand that you have a piece in this and that he had a piece in this, and you've got to fix whatever it was that you brought into this relationship that you got attracted to this guy. And that has to change. It doesn't mean really that they could, people will say, will he ever change? Will he ever change? He may choose to change, but if he chooses the same woman, just like she chooses the same kind of man, then they'll always have that kind of relationship. In a sense, they'll go out and they'll find somebody else maybe down the road, but they've had to have a lot of help getting there. Men have to go through a batterer's intervention program to do this. They have to learn how to control that anger and that control. And the woman needs to understand what her red flags are in getting into this relationship.
Now, here's one thing I want to address is the assumption that abuse just looks one way. And most of the time,
Oh, gosh,
it's
no.
labeled as physical abuse.
Oh,
Yeah.
Physical abuse is actually, the reason we label it as physical abuse because that's the penal code. That's when your sheriff's going to go in and they're going to take that guy, or take that
So
woman.
that's kind of the breaking point.
Right.
But before it gets to physical abuse, it could also come in many different
Emotional
forms.
abuse is the worst abuse. The worst abuse. It stays with you. You're told no one's going to love you but me. You're going to go nowhere but with me. And by that point, the families and friends have all tried to help her get out of the relationship. They all ask that question, why don't you leave? So they basically abandon her. So guess what? The truth is, he is the only one at that point that's going to take
They
her.
actually all proved his point.
They proved his point because they don't hang in there with her knowing that eventually something's going to click and she's going to get out of that, hopefully before he kills her, okay? And there's a great article this week about choking. A lot of times you'll see it's sexual, it's emotional, and it's physical. It's also they isolate their victims so that they'll say, your mother, she's not good for you. Your mother doesn't like me. Don't bring her around anymore. Your sister and brother, they don't like me. Don't bring them around anymore. What do you mean you're going to go hang out with your friends? Eventually, she has no one that she can count on because he has isolated her because he doesn't want anybody else to have influence
Of
over
course.
her. So we have this list that people will fill out when they'll come in, and it's a list that has probably about 10 to 12 points around sexual abuse, around emotional abuse, and around physical abuse. And when you see, they'll sit there and they'll go, I didn't know that I was in a domestic violence, and they'll cry. They'll say, this means I am in there. I thought it was only about this, but he has choked me. And if you're with somebody who chokes you, I just got to tell you, that person has the potential to kill you. That's what the research is showing, that when you've got somebody who's choking you, you're with a killer. So and we see that so many times that people will write down that person has tried to choke them. And it's like they've been with them for like 10 years. They've been with them for 13 years.
Now, that assessment you're talking about, that's what I want some of our listeners to have that little switch flip for them inside to go,
Right.
You know what, that's me, or you know what, I have some of those signs. So what are some of those non-obvious signs that start to lead up to that continued behavior? What are some of the little signs that just are subtle?
Well, the little signs are really calling you a lot during the day, saying to you, hey, can I make sure you're at your lunch desk when I call so that, excuse me, I know that I can get hold of you. In the beginning, she might think, oh, isn't that cute? He really loves me. He wants to know where I am during the day or talk to me during the day. But it's really about the fact he wants to know exactly where she is at all times. And also the other piece is texting. If you get 10, 15 texts a day from somebody, that person isn't madly in love with you. That's the problem. That person is really trying to figure out where you are and what you're doing, and they're trying to control you.
What about belittling, calling you names?
Oh, are you kidding? That's
putting you down, just constantly calling you, all the worst names in the book.
The thing about an abuser that we will tell you is, and that's why one of the signs also is that you marry very quickly, is that they're narcissists. So they bring in, they will court you. They will do everything. This guy loves you. He'll do everything that you like to do. And then once you're married, the switch turns. All right, so that's the hard part too. So when you're out there and you're being courted, just realize that, is he really wanting to know where you are more than somebody else? Is he ask about previous relationships, because a lot of times you're going to find out that, especially women that end up getting a temporary restraining order with us, they'll find out that this isn't his first restraining order, that he has DV relationships in his past. That's going to be a major red flag for you, because he's not stopping, okay? He's just moving on, but he's not stopping, okay? So the fact that he doesn't like your family, or all of a sudden he doesn't like your friends, or he likes only to have quiet nights at home but never go out with anybody else, those are the things that you have to watch out for. And the fact, in the beginning, he's not going to belittle you, so that's what's hard about it. It's after he kind of gets you and he has you, that's when that stuff starts to happen.
Does it start gradually, just little comments, just chipping away?
Yeah, you're going out, say you got a job interview, and he'll cause a fight with you right before you're leaving the house with a job interview, because he wants you not to get it. He wants it to be, or you got a big test that day.
So he's subtly sabotaging the results or getting in your head psychologically to kind of just stir you up.
And the other thing that's big too is not allowing you to sleep at night. Coming together, the sleep deprivation is a major deal, because then he can really get at you with comments, about you're crazy, you don't look good. We have clients that bring in like pictures of themselves in these like beautiful dresses, and they'll say to me, do you know what he said to me before we walked out to go to that event? This was an event like honoring me at my job. He told me I look like a big fat pig in that dress right before we're leaving. Not when I dressed up to get changed, but right before I'm leaving. So it's that nasty, nasty, nasty thing that happens. And so there are some women that would, honestly, they don't prefer to get hit, but the tension builds. What happens is a cycle of abuse. So the tension builds, and they know that something's going to happen, and they never know what's going to trigger, ever. It could be a sock on the floor. It could be a hair on the couch. It could be the kids' toys left on the floor. It's something that you could never predict, because that's the crazy-making thing about abuse. And that woman will then she would prefer to be hit. She would prefer to be hit than to have that tension and live in that tension, knowing that at any moment that guy. So did you see her like in the elevator? She hits him, and somebody said something to me about that. She went back, but he had hit her first. Well, what do you expect her to do? You know what I mean? Like, she comes at him. We have men that come to us because they've been abused, but they're really sent to us by the Department of Child and Family Services because they haven't protected their kids. When we say to them, why didn't you fight back? They'll say to me, because I'm bigger than her and I would have hurt her. So we don't see these wussy kind of guys.
That's the logical thing to
absolutely.
To me, I think that's the healthy brain.
That is the healthy brain.
Right?
But the
that's
point
that's the man that's conscious in his relationship, because he can distinguish the difference between I can hurt her. Of course, I'm not going to.
But what he failed to do is take the kids out of the situation. See, that's why he comes to us, is because DCFS says you should have removed your children when that fight began. And that's true. And that's kind of what we have to teach him. Like, what are you going to do if he attacks your mother in front of you again?
A few minutes ago, you were talking a little bit about it, and I don't know, I was following you and tracking you, and what I was visualizing was, and correct me if I'm wrong, are you saying that they would kind of start the fight to be able to get the aggression out of him so that it doesn't escalate at a bigger level? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, sometimes.
So they'll trigger it so that she can take one or two shots at it, or have him blow up verbally so that it doesn't later on, 3 days later.
That tension that you're walking on eggshells, not knowing when it's going to happen. In a sense, her triggering him allows her to just get it over with. You know what I mean?
Rather than not knowing when it's actually going to explode.
Absolutely. What a way for somebody to live.
Well, stress and trauma
and there's 15 million kids a year who live in that kind of situation. And it's really about understanding, getting help for what happened to you as a kid. That's really the outcome for this. I mean, all right. Domestic violence I say this all the time, it's a paraprofessional field, which means there isn't a ton of money out there for us. Like, we sit with these clients and we think, what are the resources that we have for them? And how do we help their kids? Because we know that these kids are going to repeat the same thing, whether they get as the girls or get into a relationship with somebody who's abusive, or it's going to be the guy that ends up, the little boy that comes to us who's going to end up being the abuser, because that's how he learned what love was. And so there needs to be so much more money out there around how do you help these kids, because that's the only way you're going to break the cycle, is that those are really two hurting people that were in that elevator, two people that were traumatized as children, and now they've met and they're hurting each other.
All right, on that note, we're going to step out on a break. Stay tuned for more. Listening to KHTS right here in your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS.
Santa Clarita's hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Special domestic violence hour? I don't know what to call it.
Sounds good to me. It's about creating awareness on something that's a hot topic right now, and it's it would be a missed opportunity to not call you and have you come in and talk about this, because whoever is listening to these sound waves that's coming to you now, you didn't turn on the radio or tune in for no reason. You turned in to become more conscious, more aware, educate yourself, and that's what it's gonna take, right, for people to start waking up and also taking a stand. What's heartbreaking for me as a dad was to watch that videotape. I hate when this happens. It breaks my heart to see someone's daughter get treated like that.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely unacceptable. And I don't know what her dad is thinking right now, but I'm pretty sure that he's confused, upset, angry, and then probably to see her still stand by him in that kind of a relationship. I don't know what's going on with him and what he could be going through. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, how do the family members, how do they feel when that's going on and they feel helpless or powerless in that?
See, it's a very confusing, this is very confusing because of the power of who he is. So I hate to say this, but we do sometimes have people whose parents will say to them, oh, just stick it out. It happened to me. It could happen to you. And just stick it out.
Now that could be a cultural thing too, right?
Absolutely.
Some of the wives in certain cultures, it's, hey, we all take a beating once in a while,
right,
and stick it out for your family type
right
of a thing.
So it's kind of a, I don't know, because I don't know this family. So I think about things like, where did she come from? Was she was she an affluent young woman? Was she a poor young woman? I mean, imagine her coming from a neighborhood that wasn't a great neighborhood and marrying him. You know what I mean? What does the family think? There are times where we've had women at our shelter that the families have told the abuser where they were, and we've had to exit them because the family really liked because remember, they're narcissists. They get people to like them.
That's right.
So
They're likable.
They're likable.
They got personality.
They'll say out in the community, everybody loved him, and then he'd come home and he was like this demon, And so I don't know that. I know you're a sensitive guy. You're thinking to yourself, if anybody did that to my daughter. I mean, I was abused, and my father didn't say a word to my husband. And one time, I think my dad was drunk, and they were out by a barbecue, and my dad just said, "So you hit my daughter, huh?" And I think that was all that got said. Do you know what I mean? Like, he didn't even know, but he had to have alcohol to even kind of give a little bravado that you shouldn't do this, but he never even dared to say that. So I think it's very, very complicated. Any human being that has to go through this, what I feel the worst is that you love somebody, and this is what love is. To me, that's what breaks my heart. It breaks my heart that kids learn this, that I'm in a class and we're teaching kids, just like you've said. And I had this little boy say out loud, well, doesn't this happen in every family? And I have to stop and I have to say, well, no, it doesn't happen in every family. But it may be what's happening in your family, but it isn't really, but they don't know.
But even if he's experiencing it in his extended family, uncles, aunts, grandparents, he's watching that, and it's the water that he swims in.
Absolutely.
Because he was born into that environment. It just seems that it's normal.
Absolutely. And that to me is absolutely horrific. And that there's the whole issue of bonding. We all talk about how important it is for mothers and parents to bond. Well, we're doing this thing with pregnant women right now because we're finding out, babies are more affected than anybody. Even a baby that's in a crib that doesn't see it but hears it, that they get this kind of irrational kind of bonding because the person that they are supposed to trust the most, they actually may be afraid of at times. And what does that do to a little infant? To me, that's the part that I just it just breaks my heart, that there isn't enough research that's done or money that's done to sort of help that when we get but I think the biggest deal here is that people have to understand that it's not an okay thing, that nobody's saying I want to be abused, that nobody is saying this I got into this marriage, I know he's going to hit me, but that's okay. That's not it at all. The woman wants to change that guy. The woman wants to totally believe that she can change him, but the guy has to want to change. And they promise and they promise and they promise. But unless somebody goes into intensive therapy or a batterer's intervention program, and unless the woman goes into therapy and gets an understanding about domestic violence, it's never ever going to change. So both parties have to be willing, and that's where it falls apart.
And I label it having a conscious awakening at some point, and it could be through a group or a workshop or something where you're going, and all of a sudden you hit your heart, you get compassionate enough, or you hit your heart and you go, wow, I can't believe that I did that. I can't believe that I showed up like that. That's not how I want to continue to live my life, and it's not how I want to raise my kids for them to see that that's okay. And then once they have that awakening, now can start a new journey of healing and growing and turning it around.
Absolutely. Sometimes I have to talk to a mother and I have to say it. I know she has daughters, and I'll say to her, do you want your daughter sitting here with me years from now, or somebody like me years from now, and having the same story. I said, if you don't break the cycle now, I mean, sometimes we have to be really hard about it. If you don't break the cycle now, then that's exactly what's going to happen. Now, that may happen anyway because of what that kid saw, but at the same point, I'd like to tug at a parent's heart to put their kids first, to make a better life for their kids. The hard part is it's so chaotic for them to get out that a lot of times the parent feels like I've done the best by just getting them out, and they don't realize how many resources they need to get to have that child.
One thing I learned about in the last year or so, being immersed in addiction personalities, that they say an addict, right, if you're addicted to whatever chemical release you're getting, an addict won't care about making a difference or making a change for any loved one, including your family members or even your kids, because they'll come to you and say, make that change for your son, for your daughter,
Right.
and the wiring is missing there. It doesn't mean anything. So there could be the possibility that when you take that to somebody that's an abusive person or an abused person, you're speaking to them, but there's no leverage there. It's not connecting for them.
I think that can be true in some cases, but I do know that I do know that a lot of women will leave to protect that child. They'll finally get it, and they'll leave to protect that child. Whether or not they understand that they have to get a lot of services for that kid after, I don't think they understand that totally, because getting out was such a big deal that becomes almost like that's the best thing, right? Like, I got them to safety, that's it. But they can't sometimes deal with the trauma because it's too painful for them to realize how much trauma their kids have
Here's
had.
another possibility, that they won't do it for themselves because they don't love themselves enough.
Well, that's what I'm trying
but they
to get
love
at.
their child more than anything.
Right.
So they're willing to do it for them.
Yeah, that's
what
I'm
sure there's a lot
hoping
of
for.
tactics you use. If last case scenario,
Yep.
it's one of the trump cards you pull out of your
Right.
back pocket.
And the thing is, too, you got to realize that we're not always saying that success is measured by you leaving. So I think sometimes people don't come to get help from us because they are worried that that's the really ultimate outcome. But if you were to come to us and learn how to be a confident person, learn how to, kind of live. It's kind of living like with an addict too, learning how to live in a situation but feeling better about yourself, then it's not like you have to leave now, You're going to just get your life together, feel better about yourself, maybe get yourself a job, prepare yourself, and maybe down the road, but you're going to have to be strong enough, and that's what the support groups do, because he's going to hate the heck that you're getting better and that you're getting stronger, and his abuse is just going to escalate because of that, so it's tough.
When we come back from the break, Anna, I want to talk to you a little bit about your story and some of the things that you had to face, some of the challenges you had to overcome, and also the courage that you had to dig down deep and muster up to be able to overcome that situation and start a new journey of personal power and growth and really kind of standing up for yourself. So stay tuned for more on this special broadcast of Domestic Violence with Alex and Kyle right here in your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS.
Santa Clarita's hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. We're also streaming live at hometownstation.com. We're having a little special hour here with the domestic violence hour, talking about, spurred on by the recent stuff going on with Ray Rice and national media covering that. And we have Anna here, and you have a pretty incredible story. And I don't know how far you want to go back, but could you I don't know what the starting point is for your story, but what is your story? Yeah.
Domestic violence started 29 years ago. And I agree, they're narcissistic, the abusers, whether it's a woman or a man. They are narcissistic. And they do isolate us from other people. And the awareness came as I become more educated, more awareness about DV. I was a health professional. And I started to realize, yes, it does exist. And it affects every level, emotional, physical. The hardest is the emotional, because the scars, there's like recording of the person's behavior towards you. Sadly, it extended to multiple generation, where I've experienced seeing relatives, children under me, experiencing themselves, and it's kind of painful. That's why I really believe awareness, education are number one. And the support groups, people don't realize the support group is not because I'm going to lean on you to scream about what's going on or bash the person. It's to get support, like two pillars, and hold ourselves up as survivors, so that when you're supported by the group, you become like a strong pillar that you can look forward, not down. And you start to realize that the person, it's their issue. We do have to get help, both of us. And if the other party chooses not to get help, then that's where the breakdown. Because you can get help till you're blue in your face. But like we've discussed, there are signs. And sometimes we don't see them. Sometimes we deny them. Majority, we do deny them. It's, we downplay it. It's not existing. It's just, he's not feeling good or she's not feeling good. But in reality, you start to see behavior. They cut you off of family, of supports that you have already. And they distance you from I'm the only one that you can't do anything. Well, by going to support group at the DV locally, which I really believe I'm a champion for them. I'm a fan for them. I really believe in all their supports. I'm always trying to inform people about it, that yes, there is awareness, and reach them. They help us in the community. I've been involved with Santa Clarita I've been here for over 25 years, and also as a health professional, I would recommend patients, as this is occurring in your life, maybe connect yourself to the DVC, and they really help you, and you see success stories and saying, I'm doing much better now.
What were some of those signs specifically in your relationship, and then what was that pivotal moment that you woke up?
You can't do anything. As Linda said, when the person comes so close to you, there's a potential that they could kill you. So it becomes a fight and flight. Am I willing to die in these hands of this person of killing me? Do I want this legacy to be of death, that somebody kill me? And it's kind of sad, like as Linda shared, family, people around you try to help you as much as they can, but after a while, they get burned out of hearing your complaint to them. And why doesn't she leave him? Well, your mind has to leave. You have to make the change yourself, within yourself, like set the boundary and say, I draw the line here, and I'm not going to go beyond this line. And it comes to a point, there's an awareness that you say, you've crossed this line, and I'm not going to go there. And like you said, the abuse escalates. And my awareness came that the abuse started to escalate and escalate. But again, like you're right, they micromanage you. If you're away, where are you at? When are you going to come back? And it's because it's a control and power. And I really encourage every youth, child that's experienced this or hearing this, anyone that's hearing this, even the abuser, to educate themselves. It's not that they're going to hell for it or they're criminal, they're the bad person. They need some help. There's something in them that's caused this. And sadly, we as people, we have to choose and walk away and say, I'm more than this. I'm more important than this. God created me, the higher power created me to be loved, to live this life, to enjoy life. I mean, since I'm enjoying life. To me, I embrace life. It does turn people away that have seen you going through this, because they feel very uncomfortable. It's a very uncomfortable situation, because it could be in their shoes also. It could happen to them also. And some people turn off and they don't want to discuss it too much. It's a taboo in the culture, in the religion, and whatever.
Well, your spirit is definitely shining bright, and I experience a free woman standing in front of me, and I appreciate you taking that time. Yeah. What comes to mind for me, Linda, is the battered wife syndrome. I had an experience early on in my early 20s of a friend of mine that was turning to me because they needed some support, some help, and I remember going to bat for her and standing up for her when she didn't have a voice, and then a couple of days later going right back to him. And that was my first experience of what it's like to take a stand for somebody and them not stand for themselves. At that time in my journey of a lower level of consciousness, I was frustrated, and I vowed to myself that I'm never going to fight for somebody more than they're going to fight for themselves. And I didn't really understand, what was going on at that time, but it was my first, kind of experience of what I labeled battered wife syndrome at the time.
Okay, makes sense. I mean, we have clients like that too, and I think at one point in our shelter with the staff that they used to say, we're only going to work as hard as our client works. And I hated that because I felt like it was negative, because everybody's different, everybody's level. And so I believe what we do now is that we say we work just as hard as our client works. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's a more positive take on it. So yeah, we're going to offer her all that she needs, but you know what? At the end of it, she may go back, and we have to have that kind of release and knowledge that she won't ever come back to our shelter, because you can only come once to a shelter, because then you'd know where it was, right? So you don't come. But she could show up at our office, or we have clients that will come at one point, not ready to do anything, and then show up like a year later, and there's no kind of condemnation about that. They just weren't ready at that point in time. And so you've got to have that release for them. And that's what happens when you say that's what happens with the family. We've given her every opportunity to leave him. I got an apartment for her. I'll pay her rent for her. I'll do whatever, but she just won't come, and
or stay.
She'll come, but she won't stay.
Yeah,
That's
and then she'd come 2 or 3 times, and then by the 4th or 5th time, it's almost like the family's like, I throw up my hands now. Like, how many times am I gonna continue? And I hear what you're saying. It's almost like you're saying you can't give up. You have to keep fighting for them,
right?
Because when you do give up, you finally give them evidence that, see, your family's not there for
right.
you. And then now the power switches into the abuser's, switches to his now
right.
position, where he can now hold it over, and he's got leverage now.
Yeah, he's the only one. And so we can't, I think that you have to live, I think it's the same thing. It's like you get what you resist, right? So if you're pushing really hard for her to come away, then it's not going to happen. Because then every time she's not even going to want to come talk to you or whatever, because she doesn't want to have you say, oh, but I've done this for you. So,
or I told you so.
I told you so. Yeah. So I think, I think it's as simple as like a prayer. Do you know what I mean? It's like you are holding out for that person. You're holding the goodness for that person, that there can be a return, that you can come back, that you're worth it.
So it's a constant invitation.
Absolutely.
Your room's here for you if you need
right.
it anytime, and just constant reminding her
right.
that she can.
Right.
When she decides.
Absolutely. And the love that you extend out, because but then you also have to realize that sometimes that's not going to happen, because, as I said to you, a lot of our kids or our clients are coming from dysfunctional families, But I will say that there are a lot of, nobody wants that to happen to their kids. It really, and sometimes we'll have kids that come out of our clients, I call them kids, because maybe 21, they're coming to us, and they're coming out of a really tough, because we'll get kids from South Central LA that'll come into our shelter, and they can't get their kids back because they don't have a family member to help them, because that doesn't have a record.
Why are they coming in so far? Is it because they Google domestic violence and you guys pop up?
We are a safe zone for them. Okay, so every time somebody calls our hotline, we have to look at two things. Well, we have to look at two things. We look at a million things. But you're also making sure that they're not in their danger zone. So Santa Clarita women could end up down in LA somewhere, or up in Lancaster, or out in Ventura. You know what I mean? So we're all sharing these resources. Every day we get a chart that tells us how many bed nights there are out there, who takes who. Are you looking for a small family? You can take a single woman. Can you take a large family? Do you speak Spanish? Do you take men? So we will actually, when somebody calls, give them numbers, all right? But they'll call us and we'll get people from, and this was a woman that had been seriously injured. She had been shot by her abuser, Okay. And she came back to us, and she is a really good mother, but because the kids were in the room when she got shot, DCFS stepped in, rightfully so, and took the kids. But she wants her kids back, but it was really hard for her because she couldn't find anybody to help her get on her feet, and no transitional house would take her, which is where we want them to go, because there is will she get her kids back? So these people get stuck sometimes too. Sometimes even we're not as much help as they need. But her dad was there for her. He actually got her an apartment so she could live on her own, and he was very, very gracious when we brought her down there to sort of set up her apartment. And but he had been there for her, but probably not as a little girl, But he was there for her now.
If someone's listening right now and their knees shaking, and they feel like we're talking to them, like they should be now listening, and you have their attention, what what do you want to say to that person? What, because you know what it's like to be on the other end. You guys know what it's like to be there and be afraid. What would you say to that person so that it moves them and inspires them to step up, pick up the phone, make a phone call, or just take some action on it?
Take that step to contact them on the hotline. They're like counselors. They will guide you. They will assess your situation, really answer some questions about your situation. You can do it in a private situation, because I think by reaching, the moment she makes the call, that's like the sign that, oh, I want to get help for her children, for herself, if she's alone, if it's a guy, partners. I mean, we're seeing it also, domestic violence with partners.
Absolutely.
Gay,
so they're
lesbian, I mean,
they're
right.
both calling saying we're abusing each other.
Right,
Yeah, yeah.
right. And that's another thing that we're really looking to do some work on too. But I think what Anna's saying is true, that you have to make the first phone call. And the number is 661-259-4357. So it's 661-259-HELP. And that, at the other end, you'll get a trained DV advocate who can help you kind of walk through. You can even come in and say, or call and say, is this domestic violence? I mean, ask those questions. Don't be ashamed, because people don't know what they're in, because you're in denial. You're in denial because you want it to work. You want your kids to have a family. You don't want this dream that you had not to be a reality.
And you've invested probably years
Absolutely.
into this
You've
relationship.
invested years. It's rare that we see that it's just a short term that these people will come in. And so you make that phone call, and it doesn't mean you have to go to shelter. I mean, a lot of people, that's not their option. But what it means is maybe you're coming in. I loved when Anna said that it's like women holding women up. There's women who are ahead of you in your story. They have been, their lives are much more successful than when they first walked in. And they look at each other and they give each other that kind of support. And our groups are always led with, it's a 16-week program, but you can stay forever if you want. We do have a next step for you to move on to if you want to, but what happens is it's driven by topics, so that you're actually learning to look inside, to understand what may have caused you to be in this relationship, and then at the same point, what things are going to happen in your life so that you cannot be in that kind of relationship again. And you share numbers with each other, and you call each other. I mean, it's similar to an AA support group. I mean, this is about recovery. It's about recovering from thinking that love hurts. It's really understanding that love doesn't hurt and that people deserve to be loved. And so it is a recovery program that in a lot of ways, people in domestic violence, just like in alcoholism, will deal with for the rest of their lives, because trauma was inflicted. So you're going to have to learn how to live with that trauma as you move forward, how to trust again, how to respect yourself again, how to respect other people again, and how to be able to love without it being a painful experience for you.
Give your number one more time and a website so people can reach out to you and get that support they need.
So it's 661-259-4357, which is 661-259-HELP. And our website, which also has lots of great information on it around what sort of signs are of domestic violence, areas and things that you can get for support, safety plans. It's DVC, it's www.dvc-scv.org. So dvc-scv.org.
Thank you, ladies, so much for your time. It's an honor, and I appreciate the gift that you guys keep contributing to our community.
Well, thanks for having us
absolutely.
come out to talk
Thank you, Kyle.
about this.
Appreciate your time.
Appreciate it.
And you listen to a special broadcast of Domestic Violence with Alex and Kyle right here in your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS.